The invitation was heavier than a tombstone embossed with the gold logo she had designed. The St. Regis Ballroom would be glittering a monument to the empire her ex-husband Richard Sterling had built, or rather, the empire he had stolen. He was bringing her the new wife, the woman who had replaced Hannah in her home, her life, and her company. Hannah Juliet was supposed to be a ghost, a forgotten footnote. But when Richard raised his glass to toast his new life, he made one fatal miscalculation. He invited the woman who knew exactly where all the bodies were buried. The cardstock was so thick it felt more like a decree than an invitation. Sterling Innovations, a decade of vision. Hannah Juliet ran her thumb over the embossed logo, a stylized S intertwining with an I that formed the shape of a microchip. It was clever. It was sleek. She knew because she had sketched it on a cocktail napkin 10 years and a lifetime ago, back when Sterling Innovations was just 2 laptops, a rented garage, and a shared dream. Now it was Richard's dream. Only Richard's. The invitation was for a 10th anniversary gala and, insultingly, a Humanitarian of the Year award ceremony. Richard Sterling Humanitarian. Hannah let out a short, bitter laugh that died in the quiet of her minimalist condo. The condo was her prize from the divorce. While Richard kept the sprawling glass and steel mansion they had built together, the courts had awarded Hannah this sterile high-rise apartment with a lovely view of the city, a city he now essentially owned. She was about to toss the invitation into the shredder alongside the junk mail and catalogs when her phone buzzed. It was Sophia Valenti, her best friend and the bulldog lawyer who had dragged her through the divorce. "You got it, didn't you?" Sophia's voice was sharp, all business. "The golden ticket to my personal hell," Hannah murmured, sinking onto a plush gray sofa. "He wants to gloat, Soph. He wants to parade his 24-year-old wife in front of the entire industry." "Amber Price," Sophia said, the name dripping with disdain. "The executive assistant he was mentoring." "Right." There was a pause, the clicking of a keyboard. "You know, Hannah, he probably does want to gloat. Men like Richard are black holes of narcissism. But he also probably doesn't expect you to show up." "And I won't." "Why would I?" "Because you're not the same woman he discarded, Hannah. Because you're not a victim. And," Sophia's voice lowered, "because you are technically still a 12% shareholder." Hannah winced. The 12% was the one thing Sophia had managed to claw back for her. Richard had tried to argue that her initial $200,000 investment, her entire inheritance, was a spousal gift. But the paperwork was ironclad. He had been forced to dilute her role, strip her of her co-founder title, and muzzle her with a ferocious non-disclosure agreement, but he couldn't take her original shares. They were a festering splinter under his skin, and a constant bitter reminder for her. "What's the point, Sophia? I show up," he smirks. "Amber shows off a diamond the size of an ice cube, and I go home feeling small." "No. You show up looking like the queen you are. You remind those people, the board members, the investors, the engineers who worked with you, that you were the brains. He was just the megaphone. You don't have to say a word. Your presence is the word." Hannah looked around her silent apartment. It was beautiful. It was safe. And it was a cage. For 2 years she had been rebuilding. She'd started a small, successful tech consultancy specializing in ethical AI integration. She was respected in her small circle, but she wasn't known. Richard had systematically erased her from the company's history. The official story was that he was the sole founder, the visionary. She was just the first Mrs. Sterling. "He'll be with her," Hannah whispered, the old wound aching. Amber. All blonde hair, sharp angles, and ruthless ambition. The last time Hannah had seen her in person was at the deposition where Amber had coolly lied under oath about the timeline of their affair. "Yes, he will," Sophia said, her voice softening for a moment. "And it will hurt. But Hannah, you know what hurts more. Letting him win. Letting him believe he broke you. Don't go for him. Don't go for Amber. Go for you. Go for the woman who spent sleepless nights coding the prototype for the Aura system while he was out networking. Go for the woman who deserved to be on the cover of Forbes right next to him. Hannah closed her eyes. She remembered the garage, the smell of cold pizza, stale coffee, and the electric hum of the servers. She remembered the moment the first Aura unit booted up, its light pulsing a soft blue. It was her light, her idea. Okay, Hannah said, her voice small but firm. Okay, Soph, I'll go, but you're helping me pick out the dress. Oh, honey. Sophia laughed, the sound pure steel. We're not picking a dress. We're choosing armor. The next 2 weeks were a blur of calculated preparation. This wasn't just about finding a dress. It was about rematerializing. Hannah was a ghost and she needed to become flesh and blood again. First, the armor. Sophia dragged her to a private atelier, waving off the trendy, flashy gowns that Amber would inevitably favor. No sequins, no feathers, no look-at-me desperation, Sophia decreed. You're not competing, you're judging. They settled on a gown of deep emerald green silk. It was deceptively simple, long-sleeved, high-necked, but cut on the bias, so that it clung to her form like liquid shadow. It was the color of money and envy. Paired with her grandmother's diamond and emerald earrings, the only real jewelry she had left from her side of the family, the effect was less wronged ex-wife and more regal, untouchable. But the physical armor was the easy part. The real work was internal. Hannah dug out her old files from the divorce, the ones Sophia had saved on a triple encrypted drive. She reread the NDA. It was brutal. She couldn't discuss the divorce settlement. She couldn't discuss Richard's personal conduct. She couldn't claim any intellectual property not explicitly patented in her name before the company's incorporation. But it didn't say she couldn't attend a shareholder event. It didn't say she couldn't exist. A week before the gala, she did something impulsive. She sent a text. Just 3 words, coffee for old times. The reply came almost instantly, where David Chen had been Sterling Innovations' first hire. He was a brilliant, nervous accountant who Hannah had personally recruited. He'd been like a little brother to her. Now he was the chief financial officer. He had testified for Richard during the divorce, a betrayal that had stung more than the affair. They met at a sterile coffee shop in the financial district, far from both their territories. David looked older, his hair was thinner, and he wore the haunted expression of a man who makes a lot of money doing things he doesn't love. Hannah, he said, fumbling with his cup. He couldn't meet her eyes. David. She kept her voice even, warm. No accusations. You look well. CFO. That's incredible. It's a title, he muttered, stirring his black coffee. Look, Hannah, about everything. You have to understand. He had me. My student loans, my mother's medical bills. He paid them off. He called it a loyalty bonus. It was a leash. I know, Hannah said softly, and the honesty of it surprised him. He finally looked up. Her eyes weren't filled with hate. They were just clear. Why did you want to meet? He asked, suspicious. I'm coming to the gala, she said simply. David choked on his coffee, a rattling cough that turned heads. Why, Hannah, don't. It's not the same place. It's not our company anymore. I know. It's his. No, not even. David leaned in, his voice dropping to a frantic whisper. It's hers. Amber's. She's not just a trophy. She's on the board. She pushes everything. This new Aura 2.0 rollout, it's all her. She wants a faster, flashier product. Richard is obsessed with impressing her. He's not listening to the engineers. What do you mean? Hannah asked, her professional curiosity piqued. The Aura system was her baby. It was a predictive smart home AI designed to be secure, intuitive, and above all, stable. The engineers, the old team, Bill, Sarah, the ones you hired, they're terrified. David whispered, twisting a napkin. "The new 2.0 software is unstable. It's built on a new cheap framework to cut costs. They told Richard the security protocols are a joke, that the whole system could be, well, compromised. Easily. And Richard, he's pushing it to market anyway. The gala is the launch. He's announcing a partnership with Marcus Thorne." Hannah felt a cold knot form in her stomach. Marcus Thorne, the billionaire. Not just an investor, a kingmaker. If Thorne invested, Sterling Innovations would go global overnight. And he's selling him a faulty product. He's selling him a lie, David hissed. And that's not all. The financials. Hannah, he's leveraged everything to fund this launch. He's moving money around, from R&D, from the employee pension fund, into boutique projects. Amber's, Hannah guessed. David nodded, his face pale. Amber's Boutique Ventures, a lifestyle brand. He's gutting the company to pay for her vanity projects, all while preparing to sell a ticking time bomb to Marcus Thorne. He's going to cash out Hannah. He's going to sell your legacy, take the money, and leave everyone else, the employees, the shareholders, the customers, to deal with the fallout. Hannah sat back, the coffee forgotten. This was no longer about a broken heart. This wasn't about a smug ex-husband and his new wife. This was about her company, her work. He was going to destroy it. "David," she said, her voice dropping to ice. "He muzzled me with an NDA. But he didn't muzzle you. As CFO, you have a fiduciary duty." "He'll destroy me," David whispered, his eyes wide with panic. "I'll be disbarred. I'll go to prison. He'll say I was in on it. And what if he's exposed before the sale? What if someone stopped him?" David looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. The quiet, bookish Hannah was gone. In her place was a woman made of steel. "I can't," he stammered. "I can't be the one." "I'm not asking you to be," Hannah said, standing up. "I'm a 12% shareholder. I have a right to be at that gala, and I have a right to protect my investment. He won't let you in. He invited me. He'll have security throw you out the second you open your mouth. Then I'll just have to be very, very careful about when I open it." She placed a $50 bill on the table. "It was good to see you, David. I'm glad to know that you're still the good man I hired." David watched her walk away, her back straight, her steps unfaltering. He was terrified, but as he looked down at the napkin he had shredded, a tiny forgotten spark of loyalty stirred within him. He pulled out his phone and sent a text to a different number. "Bill, it's time. Get the R&D report ready," the one he buried. The St. Regis Hotel was draped in sterling blue. The light from the colossal crystal chandeliers reflected off a massive ice sculpture of the S and I logo. The air hummed with the sound of a string quartet and the murmur of hundreds of voices, all discussing money power and, of course, Richard Sterling. Hannah stepped out of the cab, handing the driver a crisp bill. She had come alone. Sophia had offered, but Hannah had been firm. "This is something I have to do myself." She walked up the marble steps, the emerald silk of her gown whispering around her ankles. She bypassed the red carpet where camera flashes were exploding. She was on the guest list, but she wasn't part of the spectacle. Not yet. A woman with a clipboard and a headset gave her a plastic smile. "Name, Hannah Juliet." The woman's smile froze. Her eyes flicked up, scanning Hannah from head to toe. The name was on the list, but it was highlighted in red with a note, "Alert RS upon arrival." The woman subtly touched her earpiece. "Welcome, Ms. Juliet. Please enjoy the evening." Hannah inclined her head and walked in. The ballroom was magnificent, and it was full of ghosts, people she had hired, people she had mentored, people whose kids' birthday parties she had attended. They saw her. The whispers started instantly. "My God, is that Hannah Juliet? I thought she'd moved to Switzerland. She looks incredible. What is she doing here? This is going to be a disaster." She ignored them, her eyes scanning for her target. And then she saw them. They were holding court by the champagne tower, the epicenter of the room's gravity. Richard Sterling looked every inch the tech visionary. His tux was custom, his smile was 1,000,000 watts, and his hand was firmly planted on the lower back of his new wife. Amber Sterling was a spectacle. Her dress was a blinding column of silver sequins plunging to her navel and slit to her hip. A diamond necklace, the one Hannah had seen in Vogue, was draped around her throat. She looked less like a corporate spouse and more like a trophy. She was laughing a high, brittle sound as she leaned into Richard. And then, as if sensing a drop in temperature, Richard looked up. His eyes met Hannah's from across the room. His smile didn't falter, but it hardened. It became a mask. He whispered something to Amber, who visibly tensed and clutched his arm. With the practiced ease of a politician, Richard began to steer his new wife directly toward his old one. The divide-and-conquer approach. He was going to cut her off at the pass, humiliate her quickly and quietly, and force her to retreat. The murmur of the crowd died down. The string quartet seemed to falter. This was the moment. "Hannah!" Richard said, his voice booming with false warmth. "Darling, I'm so glad you could make it. I wasn't sure you'd—" "Well, I'm just so glad." Amber didn't bother with pretense. Her eyes, expertly lined, raked over Hannah with open contempt. "Richard Amber," Hannah said, her voice perfectly calm, perfectly polite. "It's quite the celebration. 10 years. It seems like yesterday we were in the garage on Oakwood." Richard's smile twitched. The mention of the garage of the we was a direct hit. Amber stepped forward, placing herself protectively in front of him. "Oh, Hannah, it's so brave of you to come." Amber trilled her voice just loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "And I just love your dress. Is that vintage? It feels familiar? Like something from before." The barb was sharp, meant to paint Hannah as a relic, a thing from the past. Hannah smiled, a small, genuine smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thank you, Amber. It is an older design." She tilted her head, her emerald earrings catching the light. "It's funny quality. It just lasts. Unlike other things." Amber's face flushed a blotchy red. She had been dismissed, and by the one person in the room she needed to feel superior to. She opened her mouth to retort, but Hannah had already turned back to Richard. "A humanitarian award, Richard. I'm impressed. What's the foundation? The Sterling Fund for—" "The Sterling Family Foundation, yes," Richard said, regaining his composure. He puffed out his chest. "We're focusing on providing tech access to underserved communities." "How wonderful," Hannah said, her voice silk. "It's so important to give back, especially when you've taken so much." Richard's eyes went cold. The mask was slipping. "I don't know what you mean, Hannah, but this is hardly the time or place. We're celebrating our success. We'd appreciate it if you didn't make a scene." "A scene?" Hannah feigned surprise. "Richard, I'm a 12% shareholder. I'm simply here to protect my investment. After all, you're announcing the Aura 2.0 partnership tonight, aren't you? With Marcus Thorne." This he wasn't expecting. His jaw tightened. "That is confidential company business." "Not to me," Hannah said brightly. "I'm just thrilled to see the next generation of my product. I'm sure you've maintained the security standards I established. You always were so thorough." Before Richard could respond, a new voice cut in. "Richard, there you are." It was Marcus Thorne himself, a tall, silver-haired man with the predatory stillness of a shark. His eyes swept over the trio, missing nothing. "Marcus!" Richard exclaimed, his relief palpable. He forcibly draped an arm around Hannah's shoulders. "You must know, this is Hannah Juliet, my old partner. She was with me at the very, very beginning. Hannah, this is Marcus Thorne." He was trying to frame her as a quaint historical artifact. Hannah gracefully slipped out from under his arm and extended her hand to the billionaire. "Mr. Thorne, it's a pleasure. I'm Hannah Juliet. I wrote the original source code for the Aura system. Thorne's eyebrows shot up. He hadn't been expecting this. He took her hand, his grip firm. Ms. Juliet, your name isn't on any of the founder's documentation I've seen. No, it isn't, Hannah said, holding his gaze. We had a creative parting of ways. But I'm sure Richard has told you all about my work on the original kernel, the Juliet protocol, the triple-layer encryption that made it the most secure system on the market for 5 years running. Richard was pale. Hannah, darling, you're boring Mr. Thorne with technical details. On the contrary, Thorne said, his eyes fixed on Hannah, I'm never bored by the details that make me money, or save me from losing it. Juliet protocol. You say interesting. The 2.0 specs I saw mentioned a new streamlined Sterling Price security layer. Ah, yes, Amber chimed in, seeing her name as an opening. Sterling Price. I helped Richard conceptualize it. It's all about speed and user accessibility. Accessibility. Thorne repeated, his expression unreadable. Indeed. If you'll excuse me, Hannah said, giving Thorne a small nod. I see an old colleague, Richard Amber. Congratulations on all of this. She turned and walked away, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. Richard was scrambling, trying to laugh off her comments, but Marcus Thorne wasn't laughing. He was watching Hannah's emerald green back as she disappeared into the crowd. Hannah had just fired the first shot, and she hadn't even raised her voice. Hannah moved through the ballroom like a surgeon. Her brief public encounter with the Sterlings had shifted the room's energy. She was no longer just a ghost. She was a presence. She was no longer a victim. She was a variable. She found him by the R&D displays. Bill Peterson. He was one of her first hires, a lead engineer with a brilliant, unkempt mind and a fierce loyalty to the work. He was staring at a sleek holographic display showcasing the Aura 2.0, looking less like a proud father and more like a pallbearer. It's very shiny, Bill, Hannah said quietly, standing beside him. He jumped, spilling a little of his club soda. Hannah, my God, I didn't think you'd actually... You don't look happy, Bill. This is your launch. This isn't a launch, Bill muttered, pulling her aside away from the display. It's a betrayal. We told him. We all told him. The Sterling Price protocol Amber is so proud of, it's a joke. It's a backdoor with a welcome mat. We ran simulations. A moderately skilled hacker could take over a whole network in under an hour. Control the locks, the cameras, the power, everything. And you told Richard this? Hannah asked, her blood running cold. This was worse than she thought. He told me I was losing my nerve, that I was stuck in the past, that Ms. Price, he said the name like it was spoiled milk, had assured him her data focus groups prioritized speed over invisible security. So he buried our R&D risk assessment, buried it deep. He's selling Thorne a product that could, no exaggeration, lead to the biggest class action lawsuit in tech history. He's not just selling a product, Bill. He's selling the company. Bill's face went white. What, no? He said this partnership was about expansion. He's cashing out. He's using this gala to inflate the stock, get Thorne's signature, and disappear. Probably to an island with no extradition. That son of a... Bill was shaking with rage. All our work, everything you built, he's burning it. He's burning it all down for a quick payday. Where is David Chen? Hannah asked, her voice low and urgent. I don't know. He's been a ghost all night. He's in the founder's circle, seating near the stage. He looks like he's going to be sick. Good. Hannah squeezed Bill's arm. Stay near your team, Bill, all the old guard. The ones who remember the garage. Just be ready. Ready for what? For the truth. She left him and made her way toward the heavily guarded founder circle. A velvet rope separated the elite from the merely wealthy. A security guard stepped in her path. Ma'am, this area is reserved. I'm Hannah Juliet, she said, not stopping. My 12% stake pays for this velvet rope. Move. The guard, stunned by her authority, instinctively stepped aside. David was at a table with a few venture capitalists, his face a mask of clammy sweat. Hannah slid into the empty chair beside him. "Enjoying the party, David?" He flinched violently. "Hannah, you can't be here. He'll see us." "Let him see us. Did you bring it?" "Bring what?" "I don't know what you're talking about." His eyes darted nervously toward the stage where Richard and Amber were now sitting holding hands. "David." Hannah's voice was sharp as sting. "You called me. You told me about the financials. You told me he was gutting the pension fund. You told me about Amber's boutique ventures. You said he was going to burn it all down. Now, did you bring it?" David's hand trembled as it slipped into his jacket pocket. He slid a small silver USB drive across the white tablecloth, concealing it with his napkin. "It's all there," he whispered, his voice cracking. "The real ledgers, not the fantasy ones we're showing Thorne. The shell corporations, the transfers to Amber's business. The internal memo from Bill's team about the Aura 2.0's critical vulnerability, and the signed order from Richard to proceed with launch and contain report. And something else." "What?" "The patent, the Sterling Price Protocol. It's not just bad. I think it's stolen." "Stolen from who?" "I don't know. The source code. It doesn't look like anything Richard's team has ever produced. It looks older, more academic. I don't know, Hannah. But it's the linchpin. He's selling the company based on that fraudulent patent." Hannah palmed the drive. "You did the right thing, David." "I've just signed my death warrant," he breathed, wiping his face. "You've just saved your soul," she countered. "Now I need a laptop, a quiet place, and 10 minutes. The north alcove, behind the stage. It's a small AV control room. It should be empty. The AV guys are all out front for the main presentation." "Thank you, David." "Hannah." He grabbed her wrist, his grip surprisingly strong. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to read my company's annual report," she said, pulling her arm free. She slipped away from the table. As she walked toward the stage, she passed Richard and Amber. Amber shot her a look of pure venom, a silent, "Why are you still here?" Hannah simply smiled a polite, vacant smile and continued past them, disappearing behind the heavy velvet curtain that led backstage. Richard watched her go, a flicker of genuine panic in his eyes. He leaned over to his head of security. "Find out where she went, and do not let her near the stage, or a microphone. Do you understand?" The man nodded and slipped away, but he was too late. Hannah was already inside the AV room. The AV room was small, dark, and blessedly quiet. The only light came from a bank of monitors showing different angles of the ballroom. On the main screen, a promotional video had begun a glossy, airbrushed history of Sterling innovations. Hannah could hear the muffled, triumphant music through the door. She sat at the console, her heart hammering against her ribs. The emerald dress felt suddenly too tight. She slid the silver USB drive into the port. A folder popped up. "Confidential. Eyes only. DC." She clicked it. It was a labyrinth of deceit. David hadn't exaggerated. Hannah, who had once balanced the company's books on her home computer, now navigated the spreadsheet jungle of a corporate sociopath. File after file showed the systematic draining of the company. Funds allocated for research and development were rerouted to a shell company called Price Sterling Holdings. From there, millions were transferred to Amber's Boutique Ventures, which, according to the attached invoices, had spent $800,000 on brand consultation and $1.2 million on product sourcing, which Hannah recognized as a lavish trip to Paris and Milan. He was funding her shopping sprees with his employees' pension funds. She opened the next folder, Aura 2.0, Internal. There it was, Bill's report, Critical Vulnerability Advisory. It was 40 pages long, detailing in excruciating technical language exactly how the new Sterling Price Protocol was, as Bill had said, a back door with a welcome mat. It would allow anyone with basic skills to access a user's entire home network. It was a digital time bomb. Beneath it was a one-page PDF, a direct order from Richard. The risk is theoretical and acceptable. The launch window is non-negotiable. Contain this report. All copies to be destroyed. It was digitally signed Richard D. Sterling, CEO. This was it. This was the proof. This would stop the sale to Marcus Thorne. This would expose Richard as a reckless, negligent fraud. But David had said there was something else. The patent. She found the last folder, Patent, SP Proto. She opened the source code file, and she stopped breathing. Her blood turned to ice. Her hands went numb. She stared at the screen, at the lines of code, at the syntax, at the annotations. It wasn't academic. It wasn't stolen from a rival. It was hers. It was the unfinished code from her doctoral thesis, the one she had been working on when she met Richard, the one he had dismissed as esoteric nonsense with no commercial application. It was her work on dynamic predictive AI, a new way of teaching machines to anticipate security threats. He hadn't just stolen it. He had taken her raw, brilliant, unfinished work, slapped a new name on it, and passed it off as his own. Amber's name. Sterling Price. The man hadn't just cheated on her. He hadn't just pushed her out of her own company. He had hollowed her out, taken her very identity as an innovator, and was now selling it to the highest bidder. The vulnerability Bill had found wasn't a flaw in her original code. It was a flaw in the cheap, rushed way Richard's team had tried to implement it. She heard the muffled applause from the ballroom. On the monitor, she saw Richard and Amber walking toward the stage. The award ceremony was beginning. A cold, clarifying rage settled over Hannah. This was no longer about a failed marriage. It was no longer about money. It was about a fundamental theft of her mind. She copied the entire contents of the USB drive. She opened the AV console's main operating system. She saw the presentation file queued up, Gala Speech Final v3.mp4. With a steady hand, she dragged Bill's 40-page critical vulnerability report, the PDF of Richard's contain order, and the side-by-side comparison of her thesis code and the Sterling Price patent. And she embedded them into the presentation's timeline. She set them to display on every screen in the room, including the massive 50-foot jumbotron behind the stage on a trigger. She then stood up, smoothed her emerald dress, and walked out of the AV room. She found the head of security waiting for her. "Ma'am, you're not allowed back here?" "Oh, thank goodness," Hannah said, her voice trembling with manufactured distress. I got lost. I was looking for the ladies' room. I'm so embarrassed. Can you show me back to my seat?" The guard, seeing not a threat but a flustered woman, softened. Yeah, this way, ma'am." He led her back out into the ballroom just as the presenter, a local news anchor, was booming, "And now to accept the Humanitarian of the Year award and to give the evening's keynote address, the visionary founder and CEO of Sterling Innovations, Mr. Richard Sterling." The room erupted in applause. Richard and Amber walked onto the stage waving and smiling. They were bathed in a golden spotlight. Richard kissed Amber deeply, a theatrical, possessive gesture for the crowd, before he stepped up to the podium. Hannah melted back into the shadows near the soundboard, her eyes fixed on the stage. "Thank you," Richard beamed, holding the heavy crystal award aloft. "Thank you. I am humbled, truly humbled." Amber stood just behind him, her hand on his back. Her silver dress so bright it was almost painful to look at. She was the picture of the adoring, supportive wife. "When I started Sterling Innovations 10 years ago," Richard began, his voice resonating with practiced sincerity, "I had nothing but a dream, an idea, that technology could do more than just obey. It could anticipate, that it could protect us." Hannah felt a bitter laugh rise in her throat. His dream, his idea. "It was a lonely road," he continued. "One I walked by myself for a long time. This was it. the final erasure. Hannah watched as men in the audience nodded rapt. He was feeding them the myth of the lone male genius, and they were eating it up. But I persevered, and we built Aura, a system that changed the very nature of the smart home. And tonight I am so proud to announce the next leap forward, Aura 2.0. A smattering of applause. Marcus Thorne at his front table watched the stage with a neutral, calculating expression. Aura 2.0 is more than an upgrade, Richard said, his voice swelling. It's a revolution. Faster, smarter, more intuitive than ever. And it is all thanks to the inspiration of my beautiful wife, my partner in all things, Amber Sterling. He gestured to Amber, who stepped forward and gave a small tearful wave. The Sterling Price Protocol, which she helped conceptualize, is the new gold standard in user-friendly security. Hannah's hand clenched at her side. User-friendly security. A lie that would put thousands of families at risk. And it is this innovation, Richard said, turning to Marcus Thorne's table, that will be the foundation of our new partnership with Thorne Global, a partnership that will put a secure Aura unit in every home in America. The room applauded wildly. Richard raised his hand, basking in it. This was his triumph. He had won. He had rewritten history, secured his fortune, and was about to walk off into the sunset with his trophy wife and Hannah's stolen legacy. He's a fool, Hannah whispered to herself. She slipped from the shadows and began to walk. She didn't run. She didn't shout. She just walked. Directly toward the stage. The security guard Richard had posted saw her. "Ma'am, stop." But it was too late. She was already at the small steps at the side of the stage. The news anchor presenter tried to block her. "Ma'am, this is a private event." "I'm a 12% shareholder," Hannah said, her voice clear and carrying in the sudden hush. The applause had died. Every eye was on her. "I have a question for the CEO." On stage, Richard's face had gone from triumph to apoplectic rage. "Hannah, what the hell do you think you're doing? Get her off the stage. She's hysterical. She's drunk." "I'm not drunk, Richard," Hannah said, stepping onto the stage. She was calm. She was terrifyingly calm. "I'm just a co-founder, and I have a correction to the presentation." Amber shrieked, "Get your hands off him, security!" Two large guards were rushing the stage, but a new voice cut through the chaos. "Let her speak." It was Marcus Thorne. He was standing now. His voice was quiet, but it had the authority of billions. The guards froze. Richard looked at Thorne, his face a mask of panic. "Marcus, she's a disgruntled ex-wife. This is a private, domestic issue." "It stopped being a domestic issue, Mr. Sterling." Thorne said, his eyes like chips of ice. "When you started pitching me a product built on user-friendly security. I'd like to hear what the other founder has to say." "Ms. Juliet, the floor is yours." The room was so quiet Hannah could hear Amber's ragged, shallow breathing. Hannah walked past her, past Richard, and stood at the second podium, the one the news anchor had abandoned. She looked out at the sea of faces, executives, investors, journalists. "Good evening," she said, her voice amplified by the microphone. It was crystal clear with no trace of hysteria. "My name is Hannah Juliet, and Richard is right about one thing. He did start this company with a dream. He just forgot to mention it was my dream." She turned to the jumbotron behind Richard's head. "Computer," she said, using the AV system's voice command. "Load file vulnerability report.pdf." And suddenly the 50-foot screen behind Richard and Amber was no longer a tasteful blue logo. It was Bill Peterson's 40-page report. The words critical vulnerability and risk catastrophic were visible even from the back of the room. "This," Hannah said, gesturing to the screen, "is the real R&D report for Aura 2.0, the one Mr. Sterling ordered buried. It details how the Sterling Price Protocol, The one my replacement is so proud of is, and I quote, a back door with a welcome mat. It's a system designed to fail. The room erupted in gasps. Journalists were scrambling, cameras flashing. Bill Peterson in the crowd was staring white-faced at the screen. He's lying, Amber screamed. She's a liar. Richard, make her stop. Oh, I'm not done, Hannah said. Computer load file. Contain order. PDF. The screen changed. There it was. Richard's memo. His signature. Contain this report. Proceed with launch. Richard looked like he had been punched. He lunged for Hannah to grab the mic, but the two security guards, now watching Marcus Thorne for cues, stepped in front of Richard, blocking him. And finally, Hannah said, her voice dropping, the inspiration. Mr. Sterling and Ms. Price are innovators, it's true. They innovated a new way to steal. Computer load file. Code comparison PDF. The screen split. On the left, Hannah Juliet Doctoral Thesis 2011 Dynamic Predictive AI. On the right, Sterling Price Protocol Patent Application 2024. It was her code, line for line, her annotations, her work. Richard didn't just push me out of my company, Hannah said, her voice shaking with a cold, precise fury. He stole my work, my mind, and tried to sell it to you. He gutted the company, funneling millions from your pension funds. She looked at the employees, into his wife's shell companies, all to fund a lie. She looked at Amber, whose face was a grotesque mask of horror and disbelief. He didn't just replace me, Amber. He plagiarized me, and he put your name on it. Richard Sterling was silent. He was ruined. He knew it. The flash of cameras was deafening. Hannah looked out at the crowd, at the men and women she had worked with. On November 4th, 2013, she said, in a garage on Oakwood Drive, we had an idea that we could build something that mattered, something that protected people. That idea, that was Sterling Innovations. What this is. She gestured to the sputtering, humiliated man beside her, is a fraud. She set the microphone down. The silence in the room was absolute, a crushing physical weight. Hannah set the microphone down. The solid thud as it settled into its cradle was the only sound in the colossal ballroom. It was an absolute crushing vacuum-like silence, as if her final words had sucked all the air from the room. The string quartet was frozen, bows hovering over strings. Waiters stood like statues, trays of champagne forgotten. Every eye was locked on the stage. She took her first deep, unimpeded breath in 2 years. The adrenaline was a cold, clean fire in her veins. She felt still. She turned her movements unhurried. She looked at Amber. The younger woman was a grotesque parody of her earlier confidence. Her face beneath its expensive layers of makeup was a mask of sheer, uncomprehending horror. Her eyes were fixed on the Jumbotron, where her name was inextricably linked to the words fraud shell company and plagiarized. She wasn't just implicated. She was exposed as a fool, a patsy, a cheap accessory he had tagged onto a brilliant woman's stolen work. Amber's gaze tore from the screen and locked onto Richard. It was a look of such reptilian fury that Hannah almost felt a chill. This wasn't the look of a heartbroken wife. It was the look of a co-conspirator who had just been betrayed. You, Amber whispered, a sound so guttural it was barely human. You idiot! With a convulsive sob that was more rage than sorrow, she clawed at the custom diamond SP necklace, the one Hannah now realized stood for Sterling Price, and ripped it from her throat. The diamonds, Richard's gift to her, clattered loudly onto the stage, scattering like tiny, worthless chips of ice. She didn't just flee. She stumbled, her silver stilettos catching on a monitor cable, and she scrambled off the side of the stage, a desperate, pathetic mess of silver sequins and streaming mascara, her sobs echoing back into the silent room. Then Hannah turned to Richard. He was still standing behind the podium, a marble statue of a man. His skin was the color of old parchment, His eyes were wide, fixed on the screen displaying his own signature on the contain order. He looked small. The custom-tailored tuxedo, which had seemed so imposing moments before, now hung on him a size too large. The heavy crystal Humanitarian of the Year award beside him looked like a prop from a tragedy. He opened his mouth. A dry clicking sound came out, the sound of a man trying to summon a lie that wouldn't come. He looked at Hannah, and his expression wasn't just hatred. It was a profound cosmic bafflement. He genuinely could not comprehend how this had happened. In his world, he was the visionary. He was the hero. She was the prologue. He had rewritten the story, and she had just set fire to the book. Hannah looked at this man she had once loved. This man who had hollowed out her life, and she felt nothing. Not pity, not rage, not even triumph. Just the quiet, definitive click of a lock falling into place. It was over. She turned her back on him, on the ruin he had made, and began to walk toward the steps to leave the stage. The walk felt impossibly long, each click of her heel on the polished wood a hammer blow in the suffocating silence. And then, a sound. Crack. A single sharp percussive clap. It was so loud in the void it sounded like a rifle shot. Hannah paused, her foot hovering over the top step. She looked out into the darkness of the ballroom. David Chen was on his feet. His table was in the front near the stage, and he was completely exposed. His face was a wreck, his glasses askew, his cheeks streaked with tears of terror and relief. But he was standing, and he was clapping. His hands hit each other with a slow, deliberate, painful force. He wasn't just applauding her. He was applauding his own liberation, breaking the chains of fear and complicity with every impact. He met her eyes, and in them she saw a decade of shame washed away. He was atoning. That single act of courage broke the spell. Another figure stood, Bill Peterson. His face was pale, his rumpled suit a stark contrast to the tuxedos around him. But his eyes were burning with a professional vindication that was almost holy. He didn't clap. He just stood, a silent salute from one engineer to another. Then, as if pulled by a string, his entire R&D team, Sarah, Mike, the ones who had signed the buried report, rose as one. They were standing with Bill. This wasn't applause. It was a mutiny. Then a ripple. From a table in the back, Jennifer, the head of marketing Hannah had hired right out of college, stood up. Then the finance team, the ones who had been forced to cook the books for David, stood. The applause started to swell, not as a roar, but as a growing, rumbling wave. It was the sound of the old guard. The people who remembered the garage, the ones who remembered her vision. The journalists smelling the biggest corporate scandal of the decade were next. They shot to their feet, their applause frantic secondary to the blinding blitzkrieg of camera flashes. It was a wall of magnesium pops, a strobe light assault capturing the fall of an empire and the coronation of its exiled queen. The investors stood last. They were pragmatists. They saw the R&D team, the undeniable proof of fraud on the Jumbotron, and the one person in the room who held the original uncorrupted key to the entire technology. They stood, their applause crisp, respectful, and calculating. They weren't clapping for justice. They were clapping for their new and only viable asset. The applause was thunderous now. The entire ballroom was on its feet, except for one man, Marcus Thorne. He had remained seated, his expression unreadable, watching the entire execution. The applause, as if sensing a final judgment was yet to be rendered, slowly died down. All eyes turned to the billionaire. His silence was more absolute than the one that had come before. Slowly, deliberately, Marcus Thorne folded his linen napkin and placed it on the table. He rose to his full imposing height. He did not look at Hannah. He looked directly at Richard, who was still paralyzed by the podium. "Mr. Sterling." Thorne's voice was quiet, without amplification, yet it sliced through the vast room with the chilling precision of a scalpel. "You and I will not be doing business." He let the words hang in the air, a death sentence. "In fact," Thorne continued, "you should consider this conversation our only one. My legal team, who are far less pleasant than I am, will be in touch regarding your spectacular fraudulent misrepresentation. I suspect," he added, tilting his head slightly, "the Securities and Exchange Commission will be in touch shortly after." A low, animalistic moan tore itself from Richard's throat. He finally completely collapsed. He didn't just sit. He crumpled, folding in on himself, his head falling into his hands on the podium. His body was racked with the dry, silent sobs of a man who had just lost everything. Then Marcus Thorne turned his gaze to Hannah. She was still poised on the step, a figure of emerald green stillness. "Ms. Juliet," he said, and his voice was entirely different. It was sharp, appreciative, all business. "A remarkable presentation. You own 12% of this compromised entity. As of this moment, Mr. Sterling's stock is worthless and his position as CEO is void. I'd say your 12% just became the controlling interest in a company I am now very interested in saving. A company I am interested in rebuilding around its original architect." He gave her a sharp, appraising nod. "My team will be calling your team in the morning. We will be discussing a new valuation and a new CEO." For a second, the room was silent, and then it exploded. It wasn't just applause. It was a roar. It was cheers. It was the cathartic, deafening sound of a verdict delivered and justice unequivocally served. The entire room, hundreds of the city's most powerful people, was standing. They were not standing for Richard. They were not standing for Amber. They were standing for Hannah. She looked out at them. At David, who was smiling, his face a beacon of relief. At Bill, who gave her a small, respectful nod of true partnership. At Marcus Thorne, who was already on his phone, no doubt beginning the hostile and now very friendly takeover. This was it. The public acknowledgement. The ultimate vindication. She was no longer a ghost. She was no longer the discarded first wife. She was once again the founder. Hannah Juliet felt the last trace of adrenaline recede, leaving not exhaustion, but a profound, steely calm. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. This wasn't a moment for tears. It was a moment of restoration. She straightened her back, a queen accepting the return of her crown. As the applause swelled to a deafening, cleansing crescendo, she turned her back on the wreckage of her past, on the weeping, broken man at the podium, and walked, her head held high. She descended the steps, and the crowd parted for her as she moved, a sea of respect. She walked with purpose and grace out of the ballroom and into her future. The truth, like that emerald green dress, is a powerful thing. It doesn't fade, and it always, always comes back in style. Hannah Juliet walked into that party as a ghost, but she walked out as a legend. She didn't go for revenge. She went for justice. She reminded everyone that you can't erase a person's contribution, you can't steal their legacy, and you cannot silence a woman who has finally found her voice. The standing ovation wasn't just for her, it was for every person who has ever been overlooked, underestimated, or had their work stolen. What did you think of Hannah's story? Have you ever seen someone get their power back in such a spectacular way? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more true life stories of justice, drama, and incredible comebacks. We all have a story. It's time to tell it.